Good evening. The president has arrived back in Washington tonight, facing the latest storm over the newest item on a long and growing list of statements and actions in the Russia investigation that could land him in serious legal trouble. The president calls the latest item fake news, calls the probe a witch hunt, and attacks the professionals and agencies conducting it. And even before last night's bombshell about his effort to fire Mueller, President Trump earlier this week mocked the idea that any of his actions so far could be legally problematic.
Now they're saying, oh, well, did he fight back? If you fight back, is that obstruction? Sir, you fight back, John. You fight back. Oh, it's obstruction.
Well, keeping him honest, because this is exactly what Robert Mueller could be considering. We begin tonight with a kind of timeline of what the president may call fighting back, but others may consider attempts at obstruction of justice. And though it certainly is long and might be exhausting, it is by no means exhaustive. Item 1, January 27th of last year, then FBI Director James Comey had dinner with the president. In his statement for the record to the Senate Intelligence Committee, he said the president first asked him if he wanted to stay on as FBI director, then said, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty."
Had you ever had any of those kind of requests before from anyone else you'd worked for in the government?
No. And what made me uneasy was I'm, at that point, the director of the FBI. The reason that Congress created a 10-year term is so that the director is not feeling as if they're serving with political loyalty owed to any particular person.
So is that an attempt to obstruct justice? Remember, just a week earlier, the New York Times had broken the news that U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies were conducting a counterintelligence investigation into links between Trump associates and Russia. Was that on the president's mind when he demanded loyalty from Director Comey? February 13th, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn is forced out. According to the White House, at the time, it was for lying to the vice president about ties to Russia. That, of course, was not entirely true. He's since pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. The next day, February 14th, at a counterterrorism briefing in the Oval Office, the president sends everyone out of the room except for Director Comey. Then Comey says the president tells him this about Flynn, quote, "He's a good guy and has been through a lot. I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go," end quote. He later elaborated to the Intelligence Committee.
And as I said in my statement, I could be wrong, but Flynn had been forced to resign the day before. And the controversy around General Flynn at that point in time was centered on whether he had lied to the vice president about the nature of his conversations with the Russians, whether he had been candid with others in the course of that. And so that happens on the day before. On the 14th, the president makes specific reference to that. And so that's why I understood him to be saying that what he wanted me to do was drop any investigation connected to Flynn's account of his conversations with the Russians.
So was that statement by the president to Comey an attempt by the president to obstruct justice? On March 2nd, Attorney General Sessions recuses himself. The president has been writing and publicly deriding him ever since. On March 22nd, according to the Washington Post, the president lobbies a top intelligence official to intervene with Director Comey to stop investigating Flynn. Was that an attempt to obstruct justice? May 9th, the president fires Comey, citing as the reason his handling of the Clinton email investigation. Was that an attempt to obstruct justice? The very next day, May 10th, in a meeting only captured by a Russian camera, the president boasts to Russia's foreign minister and the ever-present ambassador Kislyak, quote, "I just fired the head of the FBI. He was crazy, a real nut job. I face great pressure because of Russia. That's taken off. I'm not under investigation." That's according to the New York Times. Firing Comey took the pressure off. And as if to dispel any doubt that Russia at very least factored into the president's motivation for firing James Comey, the president said so out loud the very next day to NBC's Lester Holt.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
The day after that, the president, obviously on a roll, sent this tweet, quote, "James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press." Hollow though it was, there were no tapes. The question is, was the president trying to intimidate a future witness? And is that an attempt to obstruct justice? At the time, Press Secretary Sean Spicer denied it, saying that's not a threat. He simply stated a fact. Still unclear what fact Mr. Spicer is referring to there because, again, there were no tapes. On May 17th, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein appoints Robert Mueller special counsel, and the president begins tweeting that this is the single greatest witch hunt in American political history. He goes on to tweet attacks on Rosenstein, Attorney General Sessions, Comey, Mueller, the FBI, which he says at one point is in tatters, the intelligence community, deep state, and others, all of which continues to this day. Also, according to a source familiar with the matter, the president later pressured Attorney General Sessions to push Comey's replacement, Christopher Wray, to clean house at the Bureau, specifically to fire Andrew McCabe. That is jumping ahead. We go back to the timeline. On June 12th, Trump friend Christopher Ruddy went on the PBS NewsHour and dropped this bombshell.
I think he's considering perhaps terminating the special counsel. I think he's weighing that option. I think it's pretty clear by what one of his lawyers said on television recently. I personally think it would be a very significant mistake.
Well, we've since learned that the president did more than just consider it. He ordered it, only to back down at the last minute. Was that an attempt to obstruct justice? At the very least, the president and his people have for months been less than honest about this, including right at the very moment it actually was happening.
While the president has the right to, he has no intention to do so.
The president has not even discussed that. The president is not discussing firing Bob Mueller.
But will he commit not to fire him?
And cooperating with. He has not even discussed not fire. He's not discussed firing Bob Mueller.
I haven't given it any thought. I mean, I've been reading about it from you people. You say, oh, I'm going to dismiss him. No, I'm not dismissing anybody.
Are you considering firing Robert Mueller?
No, not at all.
Is there any chance at all that the president will try to fire Robert Mueller?
No, I saw a couple people talking about this morning, and the answer to that is no.
Do you still be integrity firing?
No, I'm not.
Well, we now know, according to multiple news outlets, that this simply is not true. So now take a look at this. These are most of the incidents I just mentioned, and I'll ask again, are any of these an attempt to obstruct justice? Is the sum total an indication of an attempt by the president to obstruct justice? It's a question Robert Mueller will decide soon enough.